Okay, so George, it is such a pleasure to have you finally on the English Coach podcast. I've been looking forward to this episode, and I hope you're feeling good and prepared and energetic for
I
this little
am
episode.
ready. I just had lunch, so I am well nourished. I'm ready for this.
Fantastic. Have you had some sun?
I had sun as well. I was outside working in the garden a little bit earlier, so it's a beautiful day here in the south of Germany. We're enjoying
Yeah,
it.
Baden-Württemberg, no?
Mm-hmm.
Very nice, very nice, very nice. Well, as you know, I'm sitting here in Berlin and I am just peering a little bit through the window and the sun looks fantastic. Haven't had a chance to go out all day, but it looks good. Looks good.
Yeah. No, for
We're
sure.
we're we're lucky. We're
We're
lucky.
happy.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I am glad to hear that again. Thanks for coming. I appreciate this cross promotional thing, us as podcasters, creators, trainers, supporting each other. You know, we have to do that. And
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
appreciate your being here. All right. Well, we're going to get straight into it because, I want the listeners, my listeners, and your listeners to have an idea of what the show is about, why it exists. And, we prepared a few questions. And basically, it is about the idea of enriching natural language. Natural language is a goal that a lot of my learners want to achieve and attain, or becoming fluent in the language. And I'm sure you can relate to that as well. No, they want to feel comfortable with speaking, not worrying too much about making excuses, and come across in the confident way, similar to what they do in their own language. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
From your
Absolutely.
side? Yes, so basically that's what it's about. We're going to be talking also about your experience as an educator, your experience with your participants, the kind of feedback you get, and also your experience as an independent, self-employed language trainer in a new culture, so to speak. And that is just the first part. Yeah. So I'm just going to jump straight into the first question, and I am going to say, George, the theme for today is handmade, enriching the natural language. What does that mean to you?
So that was a very interesting way of phrasing it. I don't think I've seen it phrased in this way before. So that first of all, I really like what you've done there with natural language. Because a lot of times we talk about fluency, right? Oh, fluent in 3 months. And a lot of times students they associate this word fluent with perfection. And that can create, in my opinion, a barrier towards learning because then they think, oh, if I'm not fluent in 3 months, then there must be something wrong with me. And the way you phrased it here with natural language, enriching natural language, I feel like that is probably more in line with the reality of the language process. So I really like it. And how I interpret it, and I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer, but I think it's about taking your current situation, your current abilities, and not about leading the learner towards perfection, where you don't make any mistakes, where you don't make any grammar mistakes, but towards helping you enrich your accent where it is today. So, for example, so I work with German people and I also work with a French company. And a lot of times they say, "Oh, George, how can I eliminate my accent?" And I say, "Why is that the end goal? Why is the end goal to eliminate uh, your German accent or your French accent? The goal should be communicating and being understood and being able to understand the other person." So I feel like, and this I know that we'll probably get into it a little bit further, but a lot of time accent gets a bad rap. People associate it with ignorance or with stupidity, when in reality, for me, accent should be associated with bravery. It shows the other person that you're willing to go outside of your comfort zone and interact with another person in their language that is not your own. So I feel like I would like to get create maybe a new way of thinking about accent And the way you phrase it here with enriching natural language, I think that can take us in a positive direction.
Yes, thank you so much for that. I mean, you've inspired me. You've actually given me a small goosebumps moment right there because we're definitely on the same wavelength. And it's about self acceptance. You know, I mean, you touched on the idea of perfection there. I agree with you. I've always been celebrating the idea of perfect imperfection, the idea of um, accent being the mark of a kind of authenticity that is sometimes quite charming. Yes, if I for example hire let's say a German engineer, you know, in let's say I'm working in America, I'm working in Jamaica, and this German engineer comes to me and he's speaking to me with an Australian accent or a British accent, then I start to wonder, is this person real? And you know, this idea of perfection, especially since we're working with adults as well, I don't know how reasonable it is to expect any adult learner of a foreign language to get to perfection in the first place, right? So it's this also giving yourself permission to feel good and feel confident and feel sovereign with the way you speak. So we're definitely on the same wavelength. I don't know if you'd say the same, but a large part of what I do, and this is definitely in agreement with what you do as well, is giving people the confidence. Not just permission to feel good, but the confidence they need also to recognize that they probably even already have everything they need. Yeah, that is, that's a little extreme, but sometimes that is the case. Because you know, I have met people who they know all the grammar rules they need. There's nothing more to teach there. The only thing that's missing is this feeling of confidence to go out and not to worry about making mistakes. And that's the impediment. So, you know, from my experience as well. Well, you know what? Since we're in agreement, I'm going to move quickly to the next question. This idea of handmade, and especially this handmade part, how does that theme play out in your life as an educator?
The handmade part, I think we had a conversation about that before.
Hmm.
But you would have to give me an example of how you interpret it so I can kind of feed off of that.
Handmade. Well, the thing is this, the needs of each learner are different, right? And I, as also someone who studied business here, you know, I know about the idea of differentiating your service or your offer. There are many organizations who they sell quick fixes. They sell, you know, off the shelf courses that are supposedly, let's say, fix alls, you know, and they make also the promise that you will be able to do certain things afterwards with a solution that is made for everyone. Now, that can be good if you're lucky enough to find a solution that fits to your particular needs. Yes, but the idea of handmade is it's more in agreement to what I think both of us do, where we actually pay attention to the individual client's needs and also care about the individual client's needs, because I mean a lot of these big companies, they don't really care about they cannot care about individual needs. They can't, because they're trying to put a product out there to serve millions, right? But the approach, the handmade approach that a private trainer or coach will take involves actually listening to the individual, yes, and finding out what their needs are and building a course accordingly. That is what I mean with handmade.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what I do because every person that I work with comes with different skills, different experiences of life. And my job as the trainer is to see how I can help this particular person reach their goals. And for every person, their goals might also be a little bit different. And also, some of the goals that they have might also not be the right goals for them. So, my job as well is helping them see um, what maybe attainable
Hmm.
goals look like. So, for example, where we talked at the beginning, where I want to be fluent in 3 months,
Hmm.
and I see that the person is starting at an A1 or an A2 level. So sometimes I've had to be honest with that person, say, hey, that's not a realistic expectation of yourself. And by creating that expectation, you're setting yourself up for disappointment, and you will not actually enjoy this process because you will be under a lot of stress and you will put a lot of pressure on yourself. So maybe there's another approach that we can take. So it just depends on who I'm working with. I will always have to see what is the best way for me to bring out their qualities. So I feel like in a way I'm kind of like a sports coach. I'm a huge basketball fan. So I see the impact that a coach can have on the players and on the outcome of a game. And I feel like that's kind of the role that I play is for this particular person, for this situation, how can I get the best out of that person? And that can be in lots of different ways. I it can be in the form of just motivating them, or it can also be in the form of sometimes being direct. As a Canadian, that's hard for me because I'm very polite and I'm too nice at times. But the longer I'm in Germany, I realize sometimes it's necessary to be direct and tell people, hey, you know what? No, if if you think you're going to reach whatever fluency means to you and you are not disciplined, you don't do the homework, you don't make an effort, then the results you're going to see are none or very little. So sometimes I and that comes with the handmade, because I think if you go to a big language school, if you're in a class with 15, 20 people, the teacher doesn't really have the time to focus on your individual needs, and also will probably not be honest with you because they want your money at the end of the day, right? It's just a big machine.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Well, you definitely there's much more to this. There's much more to this because I mean there are also people who just want a quick fix. So there are also people who just want the idea of taking part in a course, and they're not so much focused on reasonable results. They just want to be able to say that they're doing a course. There are people who never do their homework. And I mean, these are, it's not that we're saying we can't work with these people. We have to bring them to that truth. The same way I have to decide as a trainer when I go in, is my job to show how good I am? Or is my job to impart knowledge? And it's the same way I have to ask them, are you here to show me what you already know? Or are you here to get to the next level? And I'd add to what you said about the unrealistic goals by saying that it's not only bad for them, but it's also bad for you because, at the end of the day, after 6 months, they're going to say, well, why have I been paying all this money? What have we been doing? What have we achieved? And they're going to have to, especially if they have to justify financing the course in the company, they're going to have to paint a bad picture of your performance. Then you're at fault as the trainer, right? So it's also a delicate dance. Yes, this directness and so on. And that's why, as well, documenting the goals, getting them on paper somehow is important because that is in itself a kind of a learning contract. Yeah, these are the achievable goals. These are the things we need to do together. This is what you need to do as well. And get a system in place, right? With also checks and balances to remind them along the learning journey that we are on the path or we're not on the path. And also remind them, what did we agree to at the beginning? Right? So this is the handmade nature that all these quick fixes they cannot provide. And that is what upset. It's not that I'm afraid of these big companies, right? But it makes also our lives difficult because they get used to these promises that are not real, right? And then they probably expect the same thing from us. Sometimes I feel as if participants expect me to present a USB stick for them to stick somewhere, and on their body, that is. And I'm like, well, I mean, where do you get these unreasonable promises from? There's no way to become, or let's say, if somebody says, improve your English in 2 weeks, if I learn one new word, that's an improvement. It is.
Yeah,
If I learn the
absolutely.
pronunciation. So, I
Yeah.
mean,
So it's a lot of false marketing that I see, and then that's what they come to me with, these expectations. Oh, they read something online And then they expect, oh, so the first question they always ask is, how long until I'm fluent? And I say, that depends on you. Like, I will provide you with the tools, the resources, the coaching, the motivation, the support. But if you don't want to actually do the work, then your house is not going to be built.
It's also it's an endearing process actually, because during that phase of getting to know this individual and doing the handmade course, you get to know the individual and you meet the person, and they also get to see you as a person. And if we're lucky, and that's what they want, because not everybody wants to build a relationship. I mean, when I'm buying toilet paper, I don't need to build a relationship with the woman in Rossman. I just need my toilet paper or my toothpaste. But with this kind of thing, the handmadeness is then going into the building the relation, building the rapport. And we definitely agree there. Yeah, definitely, George. All right. There is another question though. Let's see. And I think you might have answered that already. This handmadeness, right? And the success stories of your course participants. Can you think of any particular instance where this approach has had clear, good results for a course participant?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times it can be a little frustrating for me as a teacher
Mm-hmm.
to witness success. For example, if I was a painter
Mm-hmm.
and I go into a house and at the end of the day the house is painted, I can see tangibly the results of my labor and I can feel good about it. With teaching, a lot of the times it's not as tangible as I would like it to be, because in part it's not in my hands. So it can get a little bit frustrating because I can give the 110%, but if the other person does not do their part, then the ship doesn't move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And at times that can be frustrating. But like examples where I'm like, okay, what I'm doing is working, is when one of the students will come and say, George, I had a conversation with an international client today. Few months ago, I would have frozen up. I would have gotten nervous. But because of the work that we've done together, I was able to speak with them in a friendly way, in a relaxed way. I understood them, they understood me. And of course, I made a couple mistakes, but it worked. Those are the moments I live for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I kid you not. These are really the moments as well. There are also others when I explain something that's pretty complicated and they just get it like that, and also the moments when they come to me and say, I really, I the same as you said. I don't have to change that story. I had a meeting last week, and before that, I was so nervous I couldn't talk. I didn't feel confident. But since our classes, I can do it, and I wasn't worried about the errors that I made and so on. We understood each other, and we were able to do business. And that's what I need. When I hear that, well, I didn't have to hide from the phone call when I saw that it was a 044, yes, or 876 or something from America. Right, I didn't have to run away from that. I didn't have to rely on the practicantin, who's probably not as committed to this job as I am, to take an important call because it's a foreign call. Things like that. When they say these things to me, I get these goosebump moments as well. But just to add as well to what you just said in terms of the commitment, another reason why it's important to document where they are and what they want. Yes, what I have to do, what they have to do, is because that concretizes their commitment. Yes. And you document it, and you can always pull this document out and just remind them lightly. It's not a whip, yeah, but you can remind them. Um, Also, I've heard this before. I haven't really been able to pull it off so well yet, but I've heard many people, creative individuals, they say in pricing creativity, if the price for your work doesn't feel like an investment, if it feels like, the money for a beer, then that is the kind of commitment that you will get from your client as well. So you'll find also that the people who pay the least, the people who are the cheapest, they actually do give the most trouble because they never do their homework. They don't value your time, and they also don't value the course. So that's another thing.
Yeah,
And
that's a very
again,
good point there
it is
with
a good
regards
point.
to pricing.
Oh
I
yeah.
remember early on, people they tried to negotiate the price with me. "Oh, George, but that's too much," and I used to say, "Okay, let me see what I can do." I never do that anymore. If I tell you this is the price because I understand the value that I bring to the table. I understand the experience that I bring, the amount of extra hours I put into it. It's not just the time that we're together, but there's also the time where I'm making corrections, where I'm preparing a lesson, where I'm fixing emails that they'll say, "Oh, George, can you quickly take a look at this email?" I'll look at it, and I'll help them with that. So there's a lot of things that I do behind the scenes that they don't take into consideration at times. But I with regards to price point, I feel like a lot of times, uh, the the person who's going to value your lessons is the one who pays what you're worth.
Yes, well, they're invested in getting back from their investment. So, I mean, as I said, I can't pull that off all the time to talk that way, but I know what you mean. The next question has to do with your experience here as an independent in a new culture. But I kid you not, for years I underpriced my work because I was just too nice. And I kid you not, man, it broke me in many ways. And now I'm at a stage where I'm a little bit more mindful of what my own work is worth, but it's also a cultural thing. And I wouldn't dare going into all the politics behind it, but it's just that if you say, for example, $50, then automatically somebody says 25. And I hate this game. I
No,
don't
I don't
do
do that
flea
game.
markets
I
really
used
well.
to do that game, and I remember I would end up with a terrible feeling at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah, and then there's a resentment as well. There's a resentment towards them, and there's also a disrespect. They lose respect for you as well, and respect for what you're offering, and everything falls apart. And the next person who comes in and offers that €5 more that I know that I deserve, then I'm gone. Respectfully, of course. So it's really sad. I interrupted you. I'm sorry about that because I'm passionate about that.
Yeah, no, that's something I had to learn over time, and it was and I'm very lucky because I have found people in my life who have been mentors to me in my development as a business person. Naturally, I'm not a businessman. Naturally, I'm more of a counselor. And a lot of these techniques of negotiation I've had to learn from other businessmen. And I just got very lucky to meet them and to say, and they told me, George, you're underpriced, or George, you have to value what you do. And I learned over time and I said, okay, you're right. And because at the end of the day, like I want to give my best. And if the person doesn't value the work that I do, then I will also lose motivation. I'm a human.
Wusstest du, dass ich als Trainer, als Mensch, für jeden Euro, den du für Online-Trainingsdienstleistungen über eine Drittanbieter-App oder Trainingsplattform bezahlst, in der Regel nur 16 Cent oder sogar weniger erhalte? Hier geht es natürlich nicht nur um mich, sondern, auf Englisch gesagt, Value for Value bedeutet, dass du die Trainer, Coaches und Content Creators, die du magst, direkt unterstützen kannst. Wenn dir gefällt, was du hörst und du dich auch für Unterricht, Gruppencoaching per privatem Livestream, Video oder sogar Virtual Reality anmelden möchtest, oder du die Sendung einfach unterstützen willst, dann tu es bitte direkt unter www.englishcoachpodcast.com. Ich freue mich drauf. Also dann, ohne weitere Umschweife, on with the show. Well, the thing is this as well, after having, as I said, studied business here, I mean, there are some principles that stick in my mind. And I mean, business serves one God, and that is maximization. So by default, they, people generally will try to get the most out of you sometimes, even if they know that it's not sustainable, even if they know it will break you. And that is one character of business that never really, even though I studied it, I never really became some kind of banker or someone working in a company like that, because that's not really in my nature. And another thing as well, I also did sustainability after that, which is more of a, it's ecological in nature, but it's all about living together with, instead of like using to death, and the two schools of thought just didn't mix, but there are people out there who will, they will do that to you, and you have to recognize that, because, and in some ways you can't even blame them, because as I said, if you worship one God, which is the, and I'm not religious really, if you worship that one God, which is profit maximization and shareholder value, and that's the only thing,
But
you
that is
have
a
to by
religion.
default,
That
you
is a
have to by
religion.
default try to, yeah, well, I don't want to get there, but they have to by default try to get the most out of you, and say, well, I understand, but I have to, break your price, and so on, and it's just it's awful. It's
But in
awful.
the end, they lose when they do that. They think that they're winning the game, but they're
Hmm.
losing that game. They're
Well,
cheating
that's,
themselves and they're cheating the other person.
of course, but we cheat ourselves as well. In our last show, the last cross promotional we did, we're talking about apps. A lot of people invest in apps not to learn, but for the game effect. So, the motivation is driven. I mean, gamification is good, but the motivation is sometimes driven to win points and hearts, and to game the game. And the actual goal of learning is forgotten. So, if that happens in the apps world, it happens in the real world as well. But that's all interesting, and if we're not careful, we're gonna get too deep into that. I'm lucky to have some good people working with now these days, and it's fantastic. And it seems that you are a lucky man as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very, very
Yeah.
lucky. The people who have come into my life
Mm-hmm.
and have been mentors, have supported me, and they have valued. I've worked with people who they see the price and say, George, I'm going to pay you more.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
you just feel humbled by that.
I've had a few as well. They give more, as though they tip on top, significantly, because of course we work with bills and everything with Rechnungen, but sometimes you get a nice tip on top, or they might say to you, well, you should think about your price, and not at the end of the course, but in the middle. And yeah, I've had that not so many times, but a few times as well, and that's always good. But I mean, us as foreigners, we are so intent on being accepted, right? And we're at the beginning, we're so thankful for getting a chance to contribute in the way we can to this society. And there are lots of people who know how motivated we are, and of course they use it, and they pay you 10 euros when you're worth 50, and that's just sad.
It is, yeah. No, but it's a live and learn situation. I've been doing this for 6 years in Germany, and it's a lot of trial and error, and lots of situations where you're like, "Ah, why did I accept this? Why did I allow myself to be in that situation?" Uh,
Yeah.
but we're
Well,
all
you
here
know
to
what?
learn.
Yes, of course, of course. And speaking of learning, we're moving on. That was a nice segue into the next two questions I have, and I think I'm just gonna ask both of them at the same time. Um, we're both of foreign heritage, right? And I could ask you about your experience here with accent and so on, other cultural aspects, and your training practice. And in the same breath, I'd ask you how you leverage your own experiences as a learner of a foreign language and as someone adapting to a new culture in such a way, leverage it in such a way that your course participants also benefit from your experiences.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I am very, very lucky to come from immigrant parents. And I tell you that because of the fortitude, the courage, the bravery it takes to go from one country and to go to another country where the culture is completely different, where you don't speak the language, and to make it. So I am the descendant of brave people. My parents came to Canada. They had 3 young boys, 4, 3, and 1-year old. They had no money. They had 2 suitcases. And they come from Central America. These are tropical countries. And they went to Canada where the winter gets to minus 40 degrees. So it was a huge change. And just to observe how my parents navigated this, how they hustled, how they worked hard in order to give me a better life. My mother to this day speaks with a strong accent, but she is fearless. This woman does not care. She always does her best to try to communicate with people, to understand what other people are saying. And I observed that my whole life. So I saw how my parents were able to navigate this new environment, which was completely different from where they came from. And they made it, right? They were able to buy their home, raise their children, and now they have grandchildren. And then I also had the immigrant experience in coming to Germany, not being able to speak the German language and having to go through that difficult process of learning it to where I am today, where I can you can drop me into any conversation with German people, I'll do it, I'll manage it. Of course, I will make mistakes, but it's not the point. The point is, can I communicate? Can I understand what the other person is saying to me too? So I bring that same energy. The examples of my parents, my own example in my life as an immigrant here in Germany, and I try to teach my students to say, hey, it is possible. So it is possible. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen it in my own life of what is possible. So you can do it too.
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, I used to go to the gym a lot, and then I started drinking Hefeweizens, and I got a little what we call a Plauze. And the little Plauze is just a little belly, just a little one. And I have some friends of mine, sometimes they worry about their weight, and I say, listen, if you're feeling worried about your weight, just think about my Plauze. So all I'm saying is that, I mean, yeah, we have to be also careful in terms of how we put that across. Um, but I understand what you're saying. If you frame that in a very positive way, in saying, well, this is the possibility, and if one person can achieve that, then you can as well. Because your participants, they're also thrust into new worlds with new languages, yes, new cultures, perhaps, right?
And that can be scary.
New mannerisms and so on. Yes, yes, yes. So you bring your own experience, and that's how you motivate them, if I understand you correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was scary. And when they tell me, George, but I'm shy, I'm like, I know that feeling. I've been there. I remember when I first moved to Germany and I really tried to say a couple sentences. And in several situations, the German people was like, huh? Was hast du gesagt? And I felt so terrible. I'm like, oh, I'm never going to learn this language. Nobody understands me. They think I'm an idiot. So I know that feeling and it's hard, but I was able to overcome it. And I came to the realization if I'm going to live in this country, I will have to speak this language. And regardless of what people say or think about me, I want to learn. And I did my best and I was able to reach a B2, a B2 level. But it came with a lot of hard work, a lot of frustration, a
Mm-hmm,
lot
mm-hmm.
of, even tears.
Yeah, well, yes, yes, yeah. I've had some tears as well. I mean, I started studying at a university here in Germany, and I talk about it. I don't I'm not really complaining because the rules are the rules. But I started at the university. You start in English, and then you have to complete the German exam by a certain. I think I don't remember what semester it was, but in all, you need something like 21 certificates to get your degree, and I needed German language and German history. And I had to change universities because I didn't manage the German test, and I think I failed by something like 1.5 points. So that was some blood, sweat, and tears. Because I mean, after having passed everything else except the language and failed by 1.5 points, then you're faced with the fact that you have to change your university because of that, and that's what I did, and finished the studies, but I did end up losing something like 2 years. Yeah. And I mean, I don't even complain about it anymore, but I talk about it. If it comes up, I talk about it because many people can't really believe it when I say that. They say, no, it must be something else. But that was the only reason, you know? And um, so I know the pain, I know the pain of or what language can cause, and also when I came here, I was also a little bit older, so the same kind, let's say the intellect that with which you're used to expressing yourself, you just couldn't bring that across. You sound like a baby, yes, and you're surrounded by babies because I think at the time the students were something like 7 years my junior, yeah, and you couldn't talk. I mean, if you were in a relationship, I always talk about this. If you have an argument with your girlfriend at the time, if she's German, she doesn't even have to respond to what you say. She just has to correct you, and then you're totally destroyed. You remember those days?
I got lucky though because my interactions with my wife have always been in English and they continue to only be in English. So
Okay,
she's
okay.
been on the other side, unfortunately for her, where I
Ah,
correct her English.
yes, 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 yes. Well, that it's also a power thing. I mean, yeah, that's also a topic that we could spend an entire episode talking about. But thank you for those reflections, those memories, and these authentic stories. Yes, very touching indeed, and I can relate to them. But I'm gonna now move over to something else, which is touching a little on what we did the last time together, and it is on digital media. How do you, sir, incorporate digital media such as sites, music, apps, different formats, and so on into your training practice now? How do you
So
do that?
I'm a big believer. I like apps and I use apps
Mm-hmm.
for everything. If I want to get in shape, I have apps for that. If I want to learn a language, I have apps for that. If I want to read books, I have apps for that. So I do enjoy uh, social, like a lot of these tools and digital tools that are available to us today. But
Mm-hmm.
of course, it can also become overwhelming because there's so much on the market.
You are now listening to the English Coach Podcast, where I attempt to add a splash of color and life to your learning experience by inviting you to live the language. The show is self sponsored and independent and offers you immersion into the language in a fun and interesting way. The English Coach Podcast takes my usual relaxed, accessible, human approach to your learning experience and, by definition, celebrates the virtues of diversity and inclusion, real people, real themes, and personalities from wherever you are. Now, this is not a formal lesson, it's a show. But if you are interested in signing up for lessons, group coaching via private live stream or virtual reality worlds, in supporting the show generally, or simply in getting involved, do it direct. And feel free to head on over to www.englishcoachpodcast.com. From the official show notes page, you will also be able to view video exclusives, little behind the scenes extras, and more for some of the more extraordinary episodes. Now, as an independent podcaster, it is important to me personally to at least try to protect the integrity of my own content and to resist as much as I can being co opted into anyone else's ads driven paradigm, together with all the other stealthy violations of your privacy and mine. Signing up directly means that absolutely no third party app downloads are necessary. It means that if you so choose, you get to receive all the episodes sent to you by email, directly from me, private and ad free, the way it was meant to be. So then, without further ado, on with the show.
So students, they come to me and they'll say, "Oh, George, what should I use?" And they want to use everything. And I just had that the other day with a new student who said, "Oh, George, I found this and I'm using this." And I say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. I think you are going to be overwhelmed. You're going to burn out if you continue in down this path of just trying to use 10 different apps at the same time." So what I would recommend is try to choose one or two, but be consistent with them and try to use them for about 5 to 10 minutes. Personally, the apps that I use is I've been using that for my streak is 1,700 and like 61 days, or every single day for 5 minutes, I make sure to do a short little game. And the idea is just to engage with the language, because at the beginning, of course, I was doing German, but at this point, I decided to start doing it with French. So it just gives me the opportunity to interact with the language, even if it's only for a few minutes a day. Uh, I have also created a WhatsApp group for my students. So in this group, I share little homework activities, because what I noticed is by doing a lesson once a week or twice a week, it's not enough if the rest of the time you do not interact with the English language at all. So I realized I needed to create opportunities for my students to engage with the English language, even if it was only for 5 to 10 minutes a day. So in this group, I share these short little activities that they can do in a 5 minute window during their coffee break or in the evening, whatever it is. The podcast, that's also a digital media. What I
Yes, I was
found
just gonna say you should talk about everything you use because I find that all interesting, and I'm curious. I'm nosy, to be honest.
So definitely the WhatsApp group is something that I use on a daily basis, about 4 to 5 times a week with my students, to give them the opportunity outside of the lessons to interact with the language. The podcast, the reason I started the podcast is what I found is it was becoming too easy for my students to understand my accent. Right? If you speak to one person consistently over time, yeah, it'll become easy to understand that specific person. But then they would go and they would interact with a British person or with an Australian or with an Indian, and then they would say, "George, I don't understand anything." And they were frustrated. So I said, I need to create the opportunity for my students to listen to other accents. I believe accents are a beautiful thing. It creates diversity, and but it can be difficult if you've never interacted with that accent before. So
Yes.
I'm constantly looking for interview partners with different accents, just so that my students over time can get accustomed to these different sounds and these different ways to pronounce certain words. So the podcast is also a tool that I use for learning, for teaching.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Um, I do the same as well, but you know, what I mean, I want you to tell me more, man. It's all good, yeah. You've told me about your WhatsApp, you've told me about your podcasting, you've told me about some apps you use there. No promotion for them, but you told me one app that you use personally. Is there anything else that you personally use? Not what your participants use, but for you.
For myself in my own learning process.
Yes, yes.
So in when we did the episode together, we talked about how apps can be a way to do these repetitive tasks.
Yes.
That during the lesson, we don't really want to spend too much time doing these repetitive things, because
Mm-hmm.
these are things they can do outside of the lesson. So the lesson, we can really focus on developing our confidence and communication and things like that. But for me, if I want to practice vocabulary, there's another app called Kahoot. Or not Kahoot, Drops. Drops is what I use. And that's a way for me to practice and repeat the French vocabulary words that I'm trying to learn. Again, right, like we're not here to promote, but I'm just telling you these are my experiences and this is what I use on a daily basis just to make sure that I am consistent and making sure that I don't forget what I've already learned, that I interact with these words every couple of days with something called spaced repetition. So these apps are good for that. They're good for that spaced repetition. So the app will bring up the word that I saw maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 days ago, and I have to just remember it again. So that's really great.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds good. That sounds good. And what about then in delivering your service as I mean, this is, I'm offering you a stage, George. Yes. So in terms of delivering your service in a good way and engaging way to your course participants, the WhatsApp group sounds fantastic with the messages, the little reminders, which are, keeping them fresh and warm, and also the podcast. I do a podcast for a similar reason. Very close actually, or probably I could say that is one of the reasons, because I always try to be, let's say, it's in and of itself inclusive, and there are different nationalities there for sure. Is there anything else that you use WordPress, of course, to express or to live out your digital identity online, so we know where to find you? You're on LinkedIn, as far as I know. Anything else you
Exactly.
use in your practice?
Exactly. There's another app. Oh, I like apps. So, but when I actually begin with a new student, I have to slowly introduce them to the different resources and tools that I use because if I show them everything right away, it can be overwhelming. There's a tool called TickTick that I use. And with this tool, what I've created is while I'm having, while I'm teaching the lesson, this list has a category for mistakes, for similar words, for vocabulary, phrases, and pronunciation. So as I
Yeah.
have a conversation with a student, as they make mistakes, either in pronunciation or in grammar, I will add that to their list. And then later on, these are just very specific mistakes to that person, right? So that goes back to the handmade. I'm
Ah.
making sure that I'm incorporating the vocabulary words that are useful to them in their lives, in their business, that I help them see the mistakes that they make in particular, not someone else's mistake, their mistakes.
Mm.
Certain pronunciation issues. Like I don't like to stress too much on the pronunciation. If if you can understand, if you say tomato or tomato, and I understand it, that's not a problem. The problem is, I'll give you an example. French people they struggle with the letter H. In French, you don't pronounce the H. So just the other day, a student of mine, she said, "Oh, we came back from vacation and we turned on the eating." And I was just thinking like, what is this turning and eating have anything like what is the connection? And then it hit me. Oh, it's heating, as in Heizung. And so this is where pronunciation can play an important role if it affects communication and the other person's not understanding you. So that's what this list is for, is to help my students see their particular individual um, areas of concern. And then as our lessons progress, I make sure to test them from time to time. Just, hey, do you remember that word we talked about, that phrase, that pronunciation issue, or this particular mistake you made with the present perfect and the simple past? And then we repeat it until that mistake is eliminated from their communication. So TickTick is a great resource I do to make sure that what I offer to my students is customized to their needs and their industry.
Okay. So that lives on like a tablet or on your phone
Exactly. So
or
TickTick is it's an app, and
hmm
that list will is on the app. They can download the app, they can practice those words, and they can see their list at any time.
it's made for teachers.
Exactly.
Yes, yes. That sounds interesting. That sounds like something I could incorporate. It would be
Absolutely.
nice to see
Absolutely.
if it could be even incorporated, because right now I have actually a membership site, with pages and so on, sign in. It would be interesting to see if that could be incorporated
Yeah,
into a
no, I can send you a
WordPress
screenshot so you can get an
installation.
idea of how I organized it,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that could
yeah.
you could definitely use it if it's of benefit to your own students.
Well, yes, of course. I mean, the thing is, you have to be careful as well with these apps, because if you're not careful, we end up working for them. Yes, you try to make the let's say the use of these apps so perfect, and you try so hard to integrate it into your system that you end up working for the apps. The way some of us work for Instagram, or YouTube.
Yeah, yeah,
But
absolutely.
I'd be very interested to see that. I do that with notebooks right now. I mean, right now I think, oh yeah, let's see, right now beside me there are like tons of books which are notebooks of errors, which is a little hard because I have to write down what is wrong. And from these books that I have, I can now make short videos, because these are typical errors, from, let's say, German learners of English as a second language. So, yeah, that's been my system up until now. All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. I mean, I also learned quite a lot, right? What was I going to say? Oh, yeah, in terms of accent, another key word that I like to use, is an international standard. Yes, because think of it this way: if you're exposed to some people, a diplomat, I was speaking to a diplomat recently, and we're talking about dialects and languages, and when does a dialect become a language? And she said to me, a dialect, or let's say a language, is a dialect with an army. Yes, that was it. And I mean, that's nothing to be, let's say, underestimated, because I mean, look at what is happening in the east of Europe right now. A lot of that is based on the politics of language as well, and the politics built on top of language issues. So it's a serious matter. But an international standard is something that will come or will emerge, or let's say an appreciation for that kind of a standard, not only British, not only American, not only Canadian or Australian. There are people who want these, but an appreciation for the whole gamut of different accents that fall under English. It's all one language basically. And I think the more people appreciate that, then the more they will be equipped, or the better they'll be equipped to work internationally, right? Because I don't remember the percentages. I think you also mentioned it in the last show. What is the possibility of you speaking with a remote worker and they're a native British speaker or American speaker?
Right.
Chances
So
are
I
they're
think
gonna
only
be
about
someone else.
25% of English speakers are native. So it's only about 25%. So the vast majority of your interactions in the English language will be with non-natives.
Exactly.
So we
And
put way too much emphasis on being perfect and sounding perfect and
yeah.
forget that the main goal is to connect and to
Mm.
communicate with another human being.
Exactly. Perfection is a good thing generally, because we need that for like heart surgery and brain surgery. But, I mean, it's being understood. And I think in a business relationship, if your business partner wants to understand you, they will. So yeah, it's being understood. Perfection is also nice, but I don't know how reasonable that might be to achieve in 2 weeks, as some people want. So we definitely agree there, for sure. All right. Well, we're coming now to the end, almost. Yes. And I think we touched on quite a few things. I'm sure both of our groups of listeners or listenerships will learn something from this. The next question was something having to do with cognitive diversity. But, I mean, diversity in terms of inclusion of knowledge from and recognition, acknowledgement of knowledge and inputs from different parts of the world, whether and different accents, different cultures, and all these things. Everybody's talking about diversity and inclusion these days, right? Now, how does that play a part in your experience and your practice as a trainer?
I've been very lucky to be able to travel and live in different parts of the world. And the person I am today is because of all of these experiences. And I believe that it's enriched my life and allowed me to live a maybe more fuller, for lack of a
Mm-hmm.
better word, a fuller
Mm-hmm.
experience on this planet. And even just going back to my root, my ancestors. So my great grandfather was Chinese. He came across the ocean. He ended up in Central America. He married an indigenous woman, a mixed indigenous and African woman. There is European in my bloodline because if you look at my face, there must be. We just don't know from where. And all the fact that like in my bloodline there are all these groups of immigrants who came together in order for me to exist. It just is such an important part of who I am, my identity, and what I want to share with the world. We oftentimes we fragment into little groups of like, okay, you look like me, you think like me, you have the same hobbies as me, and that limits our perspective. So my message to everyone is if you have the opportunity to engage with someone not just of a different culture but even of a different religion, of a different language, of a different opinion, please do so because that's only going to enrich your life, not make it worse.
In terms of the cognitive diversity, in terms of also, let's say, the customers you're serving, more pragmatic, the customers you're serving all over the world, it's good also to be mindful of their experience. Not only to sell them goods, but maybe even to produce goods to satisfy their individual needs, right? The diversity of, let's say, if you think of the fact that the woman in the house makes most of the purchasing decisions for the house. However, a lot of the household appliances and so on are designed by men. Now, that's a small example of how this kind of richness and openness and acknowledgement of the other can also make your business better, you know? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, because it could help
Yeah.
us reach certain groups that are uh, perhaps like a huge economic opportunity for
Of
us.
course, of course. And that's we have to break it down to that sometimes. Yeah, for some people to understand, coming back to the maximization principle of business, sometimes you have to break it down to that. Otherwise, it just won't be understood. But it's definitely true. And also coming back to language, right? We have to. China, for example, now is a powerhouse, right? It doesn't serve me to make fun of a Chinese accent speaking English because maybe they're, paying for my dinner, So, simply said, that is, yeah, one consideration to take into account. All right, tell you what, I'm very happy that you were here today. George, I think we made good time. It's 56 minutes already. And there is one last question that I would definitely want to ask. And it has to do with, again, in keeping with this cross promotional character of what we're doing. I want to ask you specifically, where can people find you? Where do we find your presence online?
So you can go to my website, the-canadian.com.
What? What?
I had
What?
to put the
It's,
hyphen because if it was just thecanadian.com, that would have cost me $10,000. So that hyphen allowed me to pay, I think, $10 for it or $15 in the end. The-canadian.com. So just that hyphen, I wish I could get rid of it, but it's okay. It's there. So in general, that's where you'll find me. You can message me there. Uh, I'm on Instagram under my name, or on LinkedIn as well under my full name, which is George Robledo,
Yeah.
and spelled Jorge. First name Jorge.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
if you want to find my podcast, The Canadian Wants to Know. And the reason I called it that is because it has to do with a curiosity that I have for people, for cultures, for professions, for lifestyles. And the podcast is more me wanting to learn. And hopefully, in my curiosity, other people can also benefit from as well.
Fantastic. That is very nicely said. And the podcast is available definitely on
Everywhere. Wherever you
Spotify.
find podcasts, you'll find mine. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google. You'll find it on all those platforms.
Fantastic. And for those of us who are listening, I just want to say that there might be maybe some short video interludes from this. They'll be available on the show notes page for this episode. And the links as well, yes, to your website and also to your podcast. They're also going to be there. And just in case anybody wants to find you, from listening to the show, all they have to do is check out the show notes page. All right. So, just about to close off, but, is there anything in particular that you want to ask me? That's a surprise question for you.
A surprise question.
Yes. Is there anything you want to find out about me?
Hmm. Now you've caught
Mm.
me off guard.
I've caught you off guard. Okay.
But I think with regards to let me think about this. I want to ask a good question. What does the Canadian want to know about
Aha.
Ian?
Yes.
Right.
Mm.
So I know that at this point you've been living in Germany for about 20 years. Is that correct? Like 1920, something
That
like
is
that?
that is correct. Yes,
Right.
indeed.
Can you tell me the difference in your experience from before you learned German and after you learned German? Did your experience in this country change? And if yes, in which way?
Absolutely, it has changed. It has changed because, well, I can give you a specific example. At the beginning, I took comfort in, or let's say it was like a self-protection. Sometimes you meet a photographer and they're good and they say, well, they're rubbish, or they're professional, but they say they're semi-professional. It's a self-protection that I used to use, whereas I used to say, I only speak Kinderdeutsch. Yeah. And I was in a bar one day and I ordered a Hefeweizen and I said to the young lady there that I only speak Kinderdeutsch. And she says, stop saying that. If you say that, then you'll always speak Kinderdeutsch. And it really shocked me. And ever since then, well, not really since then, but that was one of those moments that made me realize that, I have to graduate from Kinderdeutsch. And, I invested in reading. I was in a very good relationship at the time. I got lots of encouragement from my partner at the time. I admit to that. That was a great help. She encouraged me to read The Spiegel. Yes, which was not the easiest, is not the easiest to read. I watched a lot of films and I went to theater. I got really into satire and theater and artistic performances. And from my interest in these things, my language blossomed, right? And um, coming back to my experience, the act of being able to speak in the language says many things. It says that you have a certain respect for the culture, respect enough to put yourself through the trials and tribulations to get to where you are. Yeah, it shows a respect. It implies that, and you enjoy. I don't know. I'm not gonna call them brownie points, but from 10 you get about 3, yeah, or maybe even 4, because people they see you differently. You might be met with an unfriendly person on the street, yes, for whatever reason, and sometimes when as a foreigner, you use Hochdeutsch, then their aggression goes down immediately. Yes, because then you are seen as something else. I don't want to find out exactly what you were seen as before, but um, it's a different kind of inclusion that happens once you get to a certain level in the language. And it's not about perfection either. It's also about being able to take part in conversations. You know, you don't have to go into all the deepest what do you call it, politics and religion matters, but just to make a small contribution sometimes in let's say rich dialogue is definitely a plus. So in short, it has enriched my life, and I'm very glad that I was lucky enough to have the right people around me, and I made some good choices.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. That's the beautiful thing about language. It's because we kind of lose sight of why it is we're learning, and if I can get this message across to people that it's about connecting with another human being and being able to, by speaking their language, you can empathize with that person in a new way, in a better way. Uh,
Yes.
I think that to me is a motivator to continue to learn new languages and continue to engage with people.
Yes, yes. With people, you know, people for people. All right. Well, thank you for that question. I never expected it. I didn't expect it at all, but it was a good one. I appreciate it. And thank you for giving me the stage, the other way around, to get that thought out. You know, for me, this is also kind of a reflective experience. I'm also learning from, doing the show. And there are moments where I have to also reflect. And thank you for that. I appreciate it. And thank you for having been here
Yeah, no,
today.
thank you for
Yeah.
allowing me the time to share my story, to share my the work that I do. And I
Yeah.
hope that the listeners, what they can take from the episode is that it's okay to make mistakes, do your best, try, and you're going to have, at the end of it, a more enriching human experience.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. All right. Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to say goodbye and wish you all the best. I'm looking forward to working with you as well. I suspect that we might.
I think so. We'll find opportunities to collaborate.
Okay. All right. Thanks again and enjoy your day. All right.
Thank you.